Well, let's talk about Echo because I think that was another one where they're taking somebody unknown and moving them forward. Jonathan, you had a chance to watch Echo. What was your first impression of this? You finished the whole thing, I know, but what did you think of it?
Yeah, so I thought it was pretty good. Not amazing. There were certain things about it that were really good, but overall, it wasn't the best. I think in the grand scheme of things, give it like a 7 or 7.5 maybe. But there was a lot of cool elements, and so like I do like obviously the representation of not only like a person that's differently abled, but the indigenous culture. I don't remember which
The
tribe her family was
Choctaw
from.
Nation.
Choctaw, yeah, like that was pretty cool. But there's so much we see in it that, how do I say this? At first, I was like, "Wow, that's kind of lame," but then once I realized what it was, I actually appreciated it for what it was. There, I noticed some of it was too quiet. Like, why isn't there anything going on? There's no
Oh,
background
John.
music and stuff like, and like,
Oh my
no,
God, Jonathan.
but no, I'm watching it and I'm reading their sign language in the subtitles and stuff. I'm like, and this is cool, but there should be some kind of like action music going on or something like. But then it's like, okay, no, no, no. This is to make you feel what she feels in the scenes. And later in the
Yeah.
episodes, they did convey that a little better, I think, because they would go from a kind of action scene or a conversation that's verbal to the quietness and the sign, and you could see that transition. So it made it more evident. But early in the show, it wasn't so transparent that that's what they were going for. So I don't know, it's kind of odd that way. Also, the opening scene. There's several scenes where they flash back to the indigenous tribe and their evolution or their mythology of their origin or something like that. Them breaking out of that cave and things like that. It was a little. There was just not enough like context. Like I didn't understand
Yeah.
why they were showing this.
Jarring.
Yeah, it was like in too much length. If it was a little bit, it was just kind of confusing the way that was, back and forth so much. A little bit of explanation to that would help a lot, I think.
I
But
completely agree with
yeah.
you on that because first off, that's not her normal abilities, is to be
Mhm.
able to like avatar herself and check out all her ancestors. Like that's not a normal thing for her. She
Mhm.
normally is like Taskmaster, where she could see somebody's abilities and mimic them, like their fighting styles. And
Yeah.
I was kind of hoping for that just because I'm excited for that Daredevil, street level,
Mhm.
and this very young actress. This is like her main first role, Aleko Cox. Like she's killing it. She just every time she's on camera, she's just still in every scene. And so I was
Mhm.
excited to see like let's see this develop this character more because we could have her in the future. And they it was kind of like Shang-Chi. I liked how it was handled in Shang-Chi a little better. They felt like they had to MCU it up. Like, oh, we got to give this person more abilities so that they can fit in the rest of the MCU. And I
Mhm.
don't think Marvel needs to do that anymore. I think we just want good stories.
Yeah, I
especially
like
with
your
the street level stuff.
yeah, like
Yeah.
Daredevil and Punisher, like all these like kind of grounded, it's a different kind of hero. And yeah, they're not jumping into the fight with Thanos or
Yeah.
they're not doing those things, but they're stopping, the snatcher and stuff like that, like smaller or mob bosses, more grounded battles. But yeah, I agree with you that they didn't need to try to exaggerate the character's abilities. That's already, it's all about her being able to overcome her challenges and still be a hero. But then you add this like energy power avatar kind of thing, which I love Avatar, but and as soon as I realized that's kind of what they were doing, it's like, oh, that's cool. This is just like Avatar. But yeah, they don't need to add that to the character. I think it would have been good without it.
Yeah. Outside of Alekwa, some of the other acting, I got to give a shout out to Vincent D'Onofrio. Somehow, this man who really doesn't have any abilities holds his own against people. I want to see him up against Thanos. I want to see him up against Thor because I think he could just like talk them down.
Mm-hmm.
And he really does steal every scene. And he was an actor who his most notable role when we were growing up, Jonathan, was the cockroach guy from Men in Black. And that
Oh,
was
that's right.
yeah,
Oh, so it blows my mind that you say that because I did not by the face I didn't recognize it, but his voice, I
yeah.
was like, oh, that sounds just like that guy from that movie from Men in Black. But I was like, oh, it's kind of corny then that he's doing that little hamming it up a little too much. It sounds like this guy that was wearing a fake skin. No, that is that actor doing his tough guy voice or whatever.
Yeah.
I did not realize that was the same person. That's so funny.
But then just like kind of Robert Downey Jr. as well, like Marvel finds this guy who's a good actor who had a flash in the pan, was probably still working, but just not notably, gives
Mm-hmm.
him this role. And now it came out recently, I think it was Hollywood Reporter that was saying Marvel wants to make him the street level Thanos, the villain that all street level people will run into at some point or another, and eventually will have to team up to take down. We know with
Mm-hmm.
Born Again, he's going to be mayor or running for mayor, either way. And I just love that. And I don't think if you didn't have Vincent D'Onofrio or an actor very much like him, I don't think that role would have landed as well as it does.
Yeah. So, now I'm thinking like we could do a full spin-off series just about him, right?
It wouldn't. I mean, now that Marvel's paying attention, what the fans listen to a little bit better, I think that would be really nice. Yeah.
Yeah, because like how we've talked about like DC trying to do more villain based shows or movies where it's the villain's perspective. And I like how they kind of touched on that in this where they were showing the girl, I can't remember her name, the main character, Maya. They're showing
Mhm.
her, being working for this mob boss and being, pretty much a villain. And then it's still all her perspective. And Daredevil jumps in and she fights him. And it's like, oh, that's great. Now she has to worry about this, villain to her who's trying to stop her
Yeah.
from, getting vengeance for her family or whatever. And it's like, well, no, but we see him as a hero normally. So I love that perspective. So if we could see a whole series or at least a movie about, this guy coming up as a mob boss and, feeling like sympathy for him, I think that'd be really good. I think that'd be pretty cool.
Or Maya herself, who does not have that golden rule that we remember from Christopher Nolan Batman of "I don't kill people." Maya's got
Mm-hmm.
a rap sheet of death behind her, and
Mm-hmm.
will not hesitate to do it again. There's a few times where she, was ready to pull that trigger. She has pulled the trigger on Kingpin himself herself,
Yeah.
and then what I do like, again, let's talk about the Choctaw Nation and how this Oklahoma town was a character itself, and the people of the Choctaw Nation were a character themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I think they handled it very well in a way that was like, check out this world. It is important to this character. Not only just, I think the abilities weren't needed. I just think it informed who she is when she's out there in New York and alone. I think this is something that we could probably bring in for all characters going forward. We don't need to learn about everybody's background so deeply as we did with Echo, but more of that would be a really smart way to kind of introduce new cultures.
What I think would have been a better way to handle that, because I do like that Avatar thing where she's able to communicate because of her ancestry. She's able to communicate with some of her ancestors and kind of channel their energy. But I don't like that she's able like to channel their energy. Technically, I
Yeah.
wish she could, meditate and maybe communicate with him. Again, or not again. I haven't said this yet. I don't want to infringe on anybody's culture or change their history in any way. I'm just saying if this happened to align with what they believe, it would be cool for the show. But if she could, speak to or communicate with her past lives or her ancestors, and they would teach her. And so, like how she was able to, she was a great
That'd
marksman.
be
She
cool.
could shoot really good because one of her ancestors was a marksman or, really good with a gun. And certain skills that she could learn that could be learned skills and not necessarily energy coming from her hands and doing like a force push or that kind of thing. I think that would make it a little more practical and realistic.
Yeah.
And I don't know, just I think it would be a lot better that way.
Yeah, that seemed to be that, and the pacing was a big common complaint about the show. The pacing was
Mm-hmm.
off a little bit. I think the first episode did really good, but it's bogged down real hard.
Mm-hmm.
But nevertheless, let's get back to the news aspect of this real quick. You got a 7.5, you said, out of 10 on
Yeah,
this.
I would do 7.5.
I'll go seven on this as well. C plus ish,
Yeah.
for myself as well. But we talked about recently how Marvel has basically restructured how they're going to be doing their TV shows going forward. Echo is the last of the old way, where they're basically making a movie, cutting into pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're actually hiring showrunners and they're using show Bibles. And Daredevil Born Again is going to be the first one. Well, what happened was during the strikes, Kevin Feige took his time to watch what they had done already with Daredevil. He hated it and was like, no, we're redoing a lot of this. One of the things that he didn't like is off screen before the new season was going to start, or the new show was going to start technically, they killed off Foggy and Karen, his
Mm-hmm.
best friends, right? And today, or yesterday technically when we were recording this, um, he said no. They're coming back. They're gonna be back. It's gonna be the old school way, just like before. And they're fighting against Kingpin, who's gonna be mayor or running for mayor. Um, is this the first step into what we're hoping Marvel will be doing and listening to the fans and bringing back people we want? What do you guys think?
Yeah, definitely. I think if they can, like like you're saying, listen to the fans and make fine. Obviously, write a big arcing story for your show, But when you hear that feedback, it's gold. It's invaluable. That's exactly what you need. So take it and make the small adjustments as you go, if you can, without derailing your show. I think that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that point of not derailing your show because I think there's a lot of entitlement in a lot of fan bases. This is coming from a Star Trek fan that Star Trek Discovery is on this last season because the fans have willed it to die. Essentially,
Yeah.
the true Trekkies who love Star Trek want this new, different Star Trek show to die. I kind of hope that Marvel doesn't listen to fans quite that well.
Yeah. What do you think about as some you're not much of a comic book reader, Kevin. And so what do you think about Marvel trying to balance being accurate to the comics, trying something new? Where's the importance in it for you?
For me, as you stated, as a non-comic book guy, I don't care if it's true to the comics or not. I
Mhm.
know that that I'm in the minority, especially when it comes to people probably listening to this show. A lot of them are probably comic book purists, and there's nothing wrong with that either. I think that there is a place for new content with the same characters, especially like I've been watching a lot of The Simpsons lately, and of like later Simpsons, new
Yeah.
Simpsons, because
Yeah.
my 2 3 month old daughter, now she's almost 3 months old, loves staring at The Simpsons because the colors and the
Smart kid.
sounds, right? So I've been watching a lot of Simpsons, and I haven't watched it since I was a kid,
Mm,
and a lot of the flashbacks from the Simpsons of like Marge and Homer in college and stuff take place in the 90s and the 2000s, whereas when I was a kid their flashbacks took place in the 70s and 80s, and then in the
yeah.
90s. Like it's kind of like that same style of retcon. Like they're the same characters just in these new circumstances and maybe have different abilities in the case of not being comic book accurate for all this Marvel stuff. um
Yeah.
yeah, so I think that there's definitely a place for new stories with the same characters that we've known and loved all these decades, for sure.
Yeah, I
And
agree. And I think it's hard to make it where it doesn't conflict with anything from the comic books, because we've seen plenty of cases where the comic books conflict with themselves already.
Yes.
absolutely.
They have a whole run about, a hero going a certain way, and then it's like, oh yeah, no, now we have a totally different story that, is even in the same timeline still. We didn't even write in a cheat
He's
around
a
it. It's just,
variant.
yeah, he decided to, go evil and stuff. It's like, okay, well, you can't just break it and expect people not to notice, but we're going to have that same issue when we go into movies. You can't be tied down to something that already has 600 issues, or 1,000 issues written for it in the past.
One of my New Year's resolutions. I try to pick a geek resolution every year too. My geek resolution this year is to read one major comic book storyline per month, so that I'm it helps with the podcast, and it's just good to kind of know. And the one I picked for this one is Superman All Stars, which I knew the general plot of it, but now I'm actually reading it. The reason I picked it is because James Gunn is using that as his inspiration for the new Superman Legacy movie. Right out of the gun on this comic book, Superman finds out that he's going to die from basically super cancer. It's a long story, but it's super cancer. And he tells Lois Lane, "Hey, I'm Superman," and he has increased intelligence, and you can see he's cold and he's hardened and stuff like that. So if you were to be a purist and be like, "Well, I want that storyline," James Gunn's not going to kill Superman. He's not going to start things off with something as hard as like, here's a new Superman. Now we're going to give him, sun cancer and start the story. But the things that Superman learns in that story, when he proves what it is to be the pillar of humanity and what a Superman is, that's the part that he could pull from it. And I think that's what's important for Marvel to do too, is like, why do people like Daredevil? Is it because he's this kid who's, the boxer's son who was raised by a Catholic church where it's not the big church around you, but it's the small priest and nun that are taking care of you? That's the stuff that we love about Daredevil. Take those parts. You don't need to mimic the born again storyline directly. Just take the best parts of those characters. And I think listening to the fans, bringing back the fun, witty conversations between Foggy and Karen and bringing those back, I think that's kind of a first step in that right direction.
Do you think with this series they're going to start bringing in the other, like, kind of grounded characters they have too? Like, was it
I
Luke
would
Cage and Jessica Jones and stuff?
I would like to see that happen. Yeah, I think the only one that nobody cares about is Iron Fist, but I think he'll come
Mm.
with them. Iron Fist and Luke Cage are really a duo in the comics a lot. But man, I'm a big Jessica Jones fan, and so I would
Yeah,
love to see her come back.
I
She's a
think that'd be
highlight.
cool.
Yeah. I threw it out there. I think it was through the challenge, except one of the two. I run too many social media accounts. But what other super street level characters do you want brought into this new kind of universe? A lot of people are talking about Spider-Man is street level for the most part,
He
and
was
so
street
maybe
level.
we
He's
could.
been elevated. Now he's leading the MCU.
Yeah,
He's the new Iron
You've
Man.
been to
I don't know.
space, kid.
Yeah,
yeah.
maybe he takes on like a young apprentice, but even then, I mean, he's going to be tied up with the big guys.
If you play like the Spider-Man 2 video game, which if you've got to, it's such an amazing story, such an amazing game.
Mhm.
He feels very street level. There are times where the game comes to a halt, and you're very happy about this, and you're just having a conversation with somebody on a bench in a park, or you're helping start a jazz museum with this woman, like the small things like that. And I think little pieces of that will, if we could get that in the Daredevil series or something like that, will make him fighting in space feel more impactful because he's the kid from Queens and not, always fighting galactic problems. That's kind of the problem with Thor is he's untouchable now, and it doesn't feel fun when he's having real human emotions because he doesn't deserve them. So,
Yeah,
I
I
think
could see
the
like a. Oh
sorry.
no, good.
I think
Good.
the ending of No Way Home kind of made it so they set it up so he could be a street level hero again. Anyway, they kind of literally erased him in
yeah,
anything he's ever accomplished. So I think that he could easily in the MCU be that street level hero.
yeah,
That's true. I think it'd be cool if they made a story where he like decides he wants to make more like yeah, he's tied up with the big guys, but he wants to make more Spider-Mans, enlist other people to do what he's doing in their neighborhoods too. So he goes around and like finds people who he thinks are worthy and outfit them with the gear and train them, and then he has like this team of Spider-Man. So when there is a big, harder boss in Queens or whatever, he can call together the Spidey team or something like that.
yeah.
But meanwhile, they're all taking care of the small problems in their own neck of the woods. That'd be kind of cool.
I like that.
Much like Batman, he does eventually build that family up, with Miles and Spidey, Silk and stuff like that. There is a group like that, and that would be a really good movie. You're right. I think Miles Morales is going to be an injection into the Spider-Man world, into Marvel. He is such an amazing character, and as soon as he touches live action, holy
Mhm.
cow, that's gonna be big. That's gonna be big.
Who do you think could play him?
Oh, that's a
Oh
great
boy,
question.
that is. Yeah, I don't
I don't know
know.
how the age would work. It was like Donald Glover would be cool.
No, yeah, and he's now Prowler. Like they made him the actual MCU Prowler. Um,
Okay.
he's really kind of the inspiration. It's a long story, but basically, he's the inspiration for Miles Morales. It's
Oh,
because
really?
yeah, because back in the Community days, it's a long story, but basically, back in Community, people wanted him to play Spider-Man when they're going to replace him for a new Spider-Man, the Garfield Spider-Man, and he's like, "Yeah, I want to be Spider-Man too. That'd be great." And then there's a whole thing, Twitter can be, and so eventually the comic book readers or writers were like, yeah, but he would be a good Spider-Man. Let's make a Miles Morales inspired by him. And so it was this whole thing. It's so then Miles Morales is so popular, they made him part of the regular Marvel universe, not his own. And I think the MCU is going to follow suit and eventually bring him in. It has to be somebody young and joyful that will
Mhm.
kind of bring some levity back to Tom Holland's character, who's been through hell and back.
Yeah.
So somebody who's like, yeah, you've been to space, but I like Starbucks, something like that.
Nice. Yeah, that'd be
Um,
cool.